your questions. I also have a number of my staff here today, and oftentimes they are on the front lines answering phone calls at our offices. So I wanted to recognize my district director, Maddie Donovan, who has been working incredibly hard, making sure that our office is incredibly responsive. I also have, thank you. Thank you to the staff. And then I have some of my other district staffers here. Since the start of this Congress, I've already introduced legislation to help our military families and veterans, to help our farmers, to focus on education issues, as well as small businesses and manufacturers. So I'm already hard at work, and I'm continuing to be an independent voice representing this district. And again, I look forward to this opportunity to answering your questions and having a respectful discussion on a number of issues. So with that, I want to get to the questions as soon as possible so we can start the process.
Okay, when I call the number, you could announce your name and where you're from as well, please. Okay, first number 252056.
Yes, sir.
I didn't really want to be first.
Nobody does.
I'll take your push. So I come from a dairy background. Grew up on a farm all my life, and I also I worked my way into being a consultant, working with farms in the capacity of environmental, not regulator, but I help them navigate the environmental regulations that are out there. And I guess, there's a huge divide in the culture as to, looking at large farms from a negative aspect, and there's all kinds of capacities that fill into that. But I guess I look at the whole thing as, you talk about you work with agriculture, and you work with policies that are being formed, and there just seems to me that there's a lot of divide within our country as to, large farms, corporate farms, that's all bad. But we always see the maturation of every industry becomes larger and larger, just like government continues to get larger and larger. I guess I don't know what you can do, but you talk about educating. What can we do to educate the general public to try and understand that this is just a natural phenomenon to be able to grow larger and larger, and it's not anything indicative of somebody wanting to be greedy. It's not indicative of anybody wanting to put the little guy out, but that's just the way things inherently seem to go, at least in my mind.
Great question. It's also very timely. I just came from a roundtable with Cornell Cooperative Extension with dairy farmers from all across this district. And I think we understand in New York's 21st District that agriculture is an important economic driver. It's one of the top economic drivers in our district, not just dairy, but also apple, maple, specialty crops. And I want to see the dairy farmers and agriculture in general grow in New York. And I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to support our farms. Some of the concerns that were highlighted today, there is EPA overreach when it comes to how they manage certain policies and how they impact farms. The Waters of the U.S. rule, for example, has been very detrimental to farmers. Additionally, there is a lot of concerns with ag workforce. So today that was the #1 issue that dairy farmers raised with me in terms of making sure there's certainty for our ag workers. And that goes for seasonal and year-round. I've been an advocate for a 3 to 5 year dairy worker program to provide that certainty both for our farmers but for the workforce that relies on that. Another issue that is constantly brought up with farmers is it actually is a trade opportunity to export our agricultural products around the world, whether they are dairy products or maple products, which are growing around the world. So the way I get feedback from farmers is I have an agriculture advisory team. It's made up of 2 farmers in each county, 1 dairy and 1 non-dairy. And we have meetings throughout the year, sometimes conference calls. And I'd encourage you to get in touch with my office, specifically on the ag issues, as we're heading into next year's Farm Bill negotiation, because it's going to be really important to make sure that Northeastern dairy farmers have a seat in those discussions. For those of you who have a farming background, another issue, and this is getting pretty detailed in the policy, is the MPP program regarding milk pricing. It's a program that farmers can buy into as a form of insurance if milk prices go low. And the program hasn't been working as effectively as it should be, so I think that's an opportunity to strengthen that program. But agriculture is good. We want to grow agricultural businesses in the North Country. Thanks for the question. Mixing it up?
Yep, Terry didn't give his name that time, but we'll let it go. 252019.
That would be me. I'm Steve Parcell. I live here in Lyons Falls, and my question is, what is your position on Social Security?
Social Security is an incredibly important program. I believe we need to strengthen and protect Social Security for seniors of today, but also for future generations. I don't support any changes for those in or near retirement, and particularly because there are so many seniors in this district. This is one of the oldest demographic districts in the country. My office hears from seniors on a daily basis about the importance of Social Security. I also think that if you know of someone who's not getting their Social Security benefits, get in touch with us because we open a case to help claim those benefits, whether it's for a spouse with someone they've married to who has been deceased, or those circumstances. But I absolutely understand the importance of Social Security. Thank you for the question.
252006.
Steve Prager, Lyons Falls. Welcome to Lyons. We've been trying to get you here for 2 years. What do you think is the most pressing issue in President Trump's administration and facing also Congress as far as working with President Trump?
Great question. So I think the most pressing issue for this country is making sure that we have economic opportunity. One of the staggering statistics that I think makes me very concerned is that the majority of Americans think their children will be worse off than they are. That's not what this country is founded upon. This country always believed that the next generation would be better off. So I think that's tied into policies of economic opportunity. How do we grow our economy? And there are ways to do that by fundamental tax reform, by investing in infrastructure. I think President Trump has talked about the importance of both of those issues. And I think those issues, there's an opportunity to pursue them on a bipartisan basis. It was great to see both Republicans and Democrats stand when President Trump talked about infrastructure during his joint session of Congress, his first speech he delivered. That will have tremendous impacts on our economy. That's the domestic issue, but I think a number one issue is also globally the number of national security challenges we're facing at the same time. The fact that we have challenges within the Middle East, the fact that we have the issues with the North Korean regime, that combination of issues, that's a lot happening all at once. And we need to make sure that I believe that our military is adequately resourced in working with our allies around the world. So that's where I think foreign policy and domestic, how we work with the president, and what the key issues are.
Two 2055.
You sure it's not 252055? Because I've got that one.
2520.
It's you. I'm glad you checked.
You've mentioned a couple times thinking to the future, and a number of my concerns are stemming from having two little grandsons. I'm concerned about the environment, and I worry that short-term solutions take precedence over long-term vision. And I would like to see, I'd like to see more of a willingness to regulate with innovation so that we can not cripple industry or cripple small businesses, but preserve the water and the land and the air. I'd like to see more thought about corridors for wildlife to migrate, and I think that could be worked in without too great an expense, but I haven't heard a lot of talk about that. Even the wall that's being proposed along the Mexican border, if constructed as planned, will hurt a lot of wildlife traffic. I think that's a consequence that we should worry about. And I'm concerned that national parks will start to be seen as sources of minerals or oil and not preserved the way I'd like to see them preserved for my grandchildren. So I don't have so much a question as those concerns.
Great, well, I appreciate you raising the importance of protecting our environment. This district is home to the Adirondacks. We have a number of environmental issues that are tied into our economy. So I really appreciate that you talked about the balanced approach. How can we both protect and conserve our environmental resources, but also support our small businesses, many of whom rely upon recreation and tourism in this district. There are a few key issues that I have advocated for. I am proud to lead the effort to, I introduced the resolution to combat climate change in coming up with a balanced solution. That's a Republican-led initiative, and that shows independence from members of my party. And I have 17 co-sponsors, and we're gaining more, and I anticipate we'll have more co-sponsors by the end of this year. I also think this district, we've seen how renewable energy and investing in innovation actually translates to jobs. So wind, we're in Lewis County, you've seen how wind projects have made an impact and have helped create jobs. That exists in other parts of the district as well. And one of the incentives for that is wind tax credit. The solar tax credit is also an opportunity. We have companies in this district that have grown as a result of the solar tax credit, and you have individuals who are making a decision to invest in renewable energy sources. I think this is one of the issues where you will see that I have an independent record from this administration. The budget that was proposed by President Trump had drastic cuts to certain domestic programs. And while I believe there should be savings, as every family who budgets knows, you can save and you should save, those cuts are too steep, and they had an impact directly on programs in the district that combat invasive species, that would cut the Lake Champlain Basin program. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't support the budget for those reasons. That touched on a couple of those key issues, but I would encourage you to keep looking out for those members who are independent on environmental issues and do see the importance, particularly for the next generation. I mean, this is something, as the youngest member of Congress, I'm trying to lead on with that balanced approach. So thanks for the question.
Not using the glasses this time. 252057.
My name's Gordon Wallace, and I live in Gray. I'm here representing a group called Friends of Otter Creek. We have I think quite a unique tourist attraction in our area. It's called the Otter Creek Horse Park. It draws people with horseback experience from all over North America and from Canada. I'm a Canadian. We're having some conflicts with DEC on the development of the park as an economic development engine for this area. We're trying to get internships. We're just trying on roadblock after roadblock, trying to get something happening up there. I'm wondering if you can be of assistance in communicating with DEC our concerns and promoting that tourist attraction as an economic engine of this area.
Sure, so I would be happy to help. This is one of the reasons why these coffees are so effective, is we open up casework like this. I think what I'd like to do, I know you left information, but I'm going to, at the end of this, if you want to come and talk to me and the staff, we'll open up a case. And since it's a DEC program, we're going to have to work with our state legislatures and state senators, but I'm happy to get involved and look into the details and try to help you move forward in the process. Thank you. I get through a lot today. We're going quick.
252026.
That's me, Rob Dalgala. I'm a local dairy farmer. I guess my concern is, I don't know, there's a lot of people in this room that are probably not aware that there's milk being dumped all over New York State and all over the Northeast and all over this country. I'm not against large farms and I'm not against small farms. I'm just a concerned farmer.
Yeah.
There's a huge problem. We have plants shutting down all over the place, and it is detrimental to our milk price and our income. There's gonna be hundreds of farms all over this country that will be going out of business this year because of overproduction. We need a supply management, something to control the supply of milk, and we cannot export our way out of this problem. You know, it is a huge problem. There's millions of pounds of milk that's getting dumped, and there's starving people out there that it should be going to.
Yeah, as I said, having the dairy roundtable, they highlighted these issues for me, and it's something that particularly as we head into the rest of this year, I'm paying close attention to. I do not want to see the dumping of milk, and I do not want to see our farms having to sell their cows because they're not able to sell the milk, or because they're not able to find members of the workforce to actually milk the cows. I do think, while we may not be able to completely export our way out of this, I think that there should be, we should be making sure that we have export opportunities for our dairy products. That would help deal with the supply issue, but the pricing issue also we need to take a close look at, because we're at a low price right now, and we need to figure out what the policies are in this upcoming farm bill negotiations that will provide more certainty to our farmers in terms of, if there is a low price, having insurance for that.
Co-ops have to bid lower to get their product into plants. You know, so if you bid $2 or $3 under the base price, that means farmers are getting $2 to $3 less than the class price that they should be getting. You know, like I said, there's gonna be hundreds of farmers that will be going out of business this summer, guaranteed.
Well, I hope, I want you to stay in touch with our office. If you maybe at the end of it can come up to me, and I'll make sure that we're in touch with my agricultural team. Thanks.
252045.
Hal Ferguson from Jefferson County. You sort of touched on the comment about EPA funding, so we're very concerned that that's an extremely important program, and cutting funds for that is I think going to be quite detrimental. And in particular, could you make a comment about up in Henderson Harbor where I live, it's a big fishing community, that type of thing, and we're very concerned about the Great Lakes and the Great Lake watershed. So possibly you could make a comment on that.
Absolutely. So the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is one of the important programs that has bipartisan support. I just signed on a letter to fully fund the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative because it does have an impact on our river community, and it has an impact on our tourism and our broader economy. So I believe that's one of the programs we need to fully fund. Again, regarding the president's budget, I don't support the significant cuts to EPA because of how steep they are and what the impact would be on this district. Congress has the power of the purse, and we will be having an appropriations process. And there is bipartisan support for these important programs. So while the president can introduce his budget document and his budget vision, ultimately it's Congress's authority to appropriate those funds. And you'll see that the letter that was sent to the administration regarding Great Lakes, bipartisan, it really has an impact of where you are in the country, where your district or state is. So I think you'll continue to see support for Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Thanks.
252017.
Everybody checking there?
Nope. 252017.
Well, why don't we set it aside, and if someone finds it, we'll go back to it.
Strong couple might keep things going, chief. We don't have it for only an hour.
252005.
I'm going to defer my question to Elaine.
Okay, Elaine? Elaine, please.
I've already said that you were independent on some of the EPA cuts, and I don't know if you saw the cleanup of mill site would affect the funding to finishing that project. What's your role in making sure that doesn't happen?
Well, in terms of specific projects, you can get in touch with my office on specific projects to make sure if they rely on federal funding, we can get in touch with the agencies. So if it's the EPA in this case, we can get in contact with the EPA to make sure that those funds are still available. And then as the appropriations process starts this year, I have a vote, and we'll be voting in support of the EPA projects that benefit this district. So, you know, if there's more specifics as to the specific funding stream, I'm happy to get in touch with the EPA for you. Thanks. You don't have, you don't want another one?
No, that's
Okay, all right.
252024. Ends in 24. Okay.
Okay, if you come up with it, we'll go back to it.
252072.
Yes, sir.
My apologies for coming late, I was on a roof job, parked in, so I couldn't get out anyway. However, Royal Crater, and I'm from Boonville, Constableville area. My question would be, and I apologize if you've already spoke about it, where do we stand on federal reciprocity?
In terms of what?
Handguns, throughout,
Yes, okay.
pistol permit in New York, being eligible to carry throughout the nation, without having to
Yep.
get involved with
So
federal.
I'm a co-sponsor of a federal reciprocity bill, in terms of if you have eligibility in other states, it would be reciprocal for a state that you travel into. So I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. There was an article in the Times Union, which kind of covers the southeastern part of my district, just this week about that issue.
Is there a companion bill in the Senate?
I believe there's a companion bill in the Senate. I'm really focused on the House bill, but I can look into the Senate bill and get back to you.
Thank you.
Great.
252065.
That'd probably be me. One, I'm still here in the college. What do you think about President Trump and his tax fight over handing in his tax for the last 2 years?
Yeah, releasing his taxes. So this is an area where I disagree with President Trump. Over the course of the campaign, I called for him to release his taxes. You can find my taxes on my website. I've released them since I've run. I will release my taxes later on this year. I believe in transparency, and that's an area where I've disagreed with the president on.
Five 2041.
My question's been answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sounds good.
252028. Still got 2017 and 2024 yet. Takers? 252003.
John Donahue, you already answered one of my questions. The second one is, Canada has decided to take upon themselves to take tens of thousands of refugees from Syria and the Middle East. What are we doing to secure our border? Anything new and exciting to make sure that those people who go to Canada stay in Canada?
Sure, so I know that's an important issue, and people fall on both sides of this issue. When it comes to our northern border, we have very good working relationships with the Canadian equivalent of the Border we work together hand in hand with them. I think it's really important when it comes to our northern border, we don't have the same type of challenges as the southern border. We need to ensure that we're continuing to have commerce and that balance there. But certainly, I've been up to many of the ports in this district to see how that information sharing works and how they check into potential national security challenges. But again, that's working as a partnership with our Canadian counterparts.
Has the border patrol been increased up there?
In terms of the personnel with the Border Patrol, I'd have to look at the specific numbers. That would be probably part of this appropriations process in terms of the funding for Border Patrol. So I'm not aware of any particular increases in the number of personnel. But again, we're starting the appropriations process in this Congress.
252039.
Yes.
So, Steve Mitchell, Lyons. I'd like to talk a little bit about the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
The American Health Care Act was projected as not really saving any money, but costing a lot of people health care. And I know that you worked to try to improve certain aspects of it. It didn't really seem that there was much improving. And while I'm a fan of appealing the act myself, if it's replaced with something that works better, I think that you're after repealing it without a replacement that's an improvement is kind of a problem. So I'm wondering why, I'm wondering what your philosophy was behind not taking a strong stance in either direction.
Sure, so my stance has been very specific on healthcare. I do support repealing and replacing. I'm not someone who believes we need to repeal and do nothing. My goal is to make healthcare more affordable, more accessible, and higher quality. And I'm on Obamacare. That was a pledge I made to constituents in this district when I ran, because I think elected officials should live by the same laws as the people we represent. So I'm proud to have taken that pledge. And I've seen what works, but also what doesn't work. Some of the concerns that I hear from constituents are the high deductibles, the lack of choices when it comes to what is in your network. It's concerning to me that a third of the counties across the country only have one insurer on the exchange. I wrote the biggest fix to the Affordable Care Act, the repeal of the auto enrollment that was signed into law by President Obama as part of a broader legislative package. I've also advocated for fixes like repealing the medical device tax, which hurts the medical device manufacturers in this district, whether it's NewMed up in St. Lawrence County or the many catheter manufacturers we have in Warren County. The reason why I think it's important when it comes to healthcare, the reason why it's important to have a seat at the table is we need to know what's in the final legislative package. As we saw when Obamacare was passed, there were last-minute changes made to get it across the finish line in the Senate. This district deserves a representative who has an understanding of all the final details before a package comes to a floor. They were negotiating until the final hour, and it was clear they didn't have the votes. But I wanted to make sure that any final changes, I wanted to understand the impact in the district. So I will continue reviewing those final changes and advocating for issues that will impact rural regions, that will have hospitals in this district with a huge population of Medicaid patients that they serve. We shouldn't be pulling out the rug from under those individuals. So having a 3-year window, I think, would ensure that. There are some who want to see an end to that program at the end of this year. I think that is too difficult to manage for a state that's expanded Medicaid. I also have advocated for continued coverage for essential health benefits. That includes maternity coverage, preventative care, addiction treatment. Those are important. Those are some of the most popular provisions in the Affordable Care Act that we need to keep in a replacement. But I absolutely think that this law is failing. We need to figure out a better direction. We need to make sure that we have higher quality and better access, and that our hospitals are continuing to thrive in this region. So it's continuing to be negotiated. I would be supportive of bipartisan fixes. I would be supportive of a bipartisan replacement, and I want to see what that final deal is. And I think this district deserves a seat at the table for that final deal. Thanks.
252030.
Yes, sir.
George Becerra, and I'm president of the Chapter 444 of the National Active and Retired Federal Employees. My question is basically threefold, and it's based on jobs. Every politician promises jobs, and when you look around, in particular in certain areas, things aren't being followed up. I just want to, when Climax closed, okay, a friend of mine's house was just thrown right out. They inquired with your office, now which one I don't know, if it was down in Washington D.C. or if it was one of the local officers or where. When they inquired about what you could do for them, the response they got was, it's a local problem, not a federal problem. Now, just recently, Senator Schumer and Gillibrand got some federal monies to help some of these displaced workers. So where they found something and the consideration on your office was not even a concern. In addition, up at Fort Drum, there is a contractor that works on the helicopters. He's going to be laying off 44 workers. What I understand from that is that there is not an equal distribution of the work for that type of helicopter around the country. Some are overburdened and some of them are being let loose or not having enough. Why can't that distribution be brought up to Fort Drum and keep those people in their jobs instead of laying them off again, another one being laid off? And then finally, the federal workforce, which I very much work with. Again, we have another hiring freeze. Again, certain benefits have been chopped on, or other programs as far as into the retirements, increasing the pay on the retirements. And I just want to know what your office, just not looking at the civilians in this area here, but the federal workforce, with Fort Drum being the largest employer of federal employees, intend to do. And then the other thing that I handed you was the House Resolution 1251, which is the CPI index that has been introduced, which will affect everybody in this room, from senior citizens, as to how it's evaluated and be more fairly equitably figured out. So,
Great.
all in one.
Absolutely. So the Climax closure, I apologize. I will follow up with members of my team to see who that individual spoke with. But certainly I was paying very close attention and was deeply concerned about the number of families this impacted. We have worked with the local chambers, with local electeds on that issue, because I think the key to solving it is ensuring that you have jobs created that the skilled workforce can go to. So absolutely, I will follow up with my team, because that was devastating to this community in terms of the number of families it impacted. So thank you for bringing that up. On the helicopter issue, I'm going to have to look into that specifically, so maybe you can follow up with Maddie. We're already looking into it, so my staff is on top of it. Thank you, Maddie, and we'll get back to you. On the federal workforce piece, I have written letters to the administration, particularly from my role on the House Armed Services Committee, about the negative impact on our military readiness the hiring freeze has. So I have been on record opposing the hiring freeze, specifically for how it impacts Fort Drum. And we'd be happy to share that letter with you. There's been local articles in the Watertown Daily Times about that. But please, when you hear these things, get in touch with my office. Again, sometimes we have interns who are answering the phone, but I will follow up with whomever that person spoke with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
252022.
Don Metzger, Jefferson County. A couple of comments. One, just a historical note. My grandfather, Roy Studer, approximately 80 years ago, was one of the managers of the paper mill here in Lyons Falls, and I heard, as historical perspective, I offer that. First comment is, I want to thank you for your support of the U.S. Army 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum in Jefferson County. And we truly appreciate you've been a supporter of Fort Drum right from the beginning, and we appreciate that. And thirdly, as you know, I'm a very avid skier like your dad Ken. And I have to say that we are so appreciative of his efforts at Whiteface Mountain, State Mountain, at Whiteface, and his role on the host patrol area. He's the perfect person for the host patrol with his love of the mountain, his love of skiing, his outgoing personality. And he's a great addition to the staff there. How he feels about you being a congresswoman, I don't know, but I can tell you this, he feels that you are his best ski buddy.
Well, I consider that too with my dad. First of all, thank you for everything you do for Whiteface Mountain. Again, the winter recreation we have, the Olympic facilities are so important to this district. My dad loves being a mountain host at Whiteface, and for those of you that have participated in the Adirondack Challenge, which we didn't have this year, my dad had the fastest ski time, and I was a close second, but he really beat me on that, so thank you. I know he enjoyed skiing with you, and again, for those of you, this district is very big, but that's a huge economic driver for recreation in the district, and I want to do everything I can to support our sportsmen and our outdoorsmen in this district, so thanks.
10 minute warning. 252046.
My name is Hal Ferguson. My neighbor gave me your ticket, so I could ask a question. So, okay, my question is, I know you're on the Intelligence Committee, and I know you're involved in many things with cyber terrorism and cyber crime and that type of thing. And also, I happened to catch your interview on C-SPAN with the author of iWars. And so my question is, how, in other words, is our next major involvement not going to be North Korea, but possibly some sort of cutting, having our whole electrical grid stop through iWars?
It's a great question. I am chairing the Emerging Threats Subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee, so cybersecurity falls under that committee. So does information warfare. And in the interview about the book, there are 4 major actors when it comes to cyber warfare against the U.S. North Korea is one of them, Iran is another, China and Russia. And it's my job as part of the Emerging Threats Subcommittee to make sure that our cyber command, which is